If you just say, well, looks like this is working out, what's going to happen is that over time, divisions will become more entrenched. People that work from home most likely are going to experience what people in subsidiary offices feel: left out.
Welcome back to From Poop to Gold. I'm Benton Crane, your co-host and the CEO of Harmon Brothers. On today's episode, I am joined by Laura Kriska. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Thank you, Benton. It's lovely to be here.
Laura is the founder and CEO of a company called WeBuilding, and she is also the author of a couple of books. The first one, The Accidental Office Lady, which is a book about her experience as the first woman working in the Tokyo headquarters of Honda. And her more recent book is The Business of We. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, Laura.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the show. It is my life's work to help people build lasting trust across us versus them gaps. These gaps could be related to a business mandate, like, sales versus marketing. I don't know about you, but any organization I have ever been in, and I've been in many in my 30-year career, there are always us versus them gaps. So, manufacturing versus engineering, blue collar versus white collar, front office versus back office. So these gaps can interfere with good communication, strong relationships, effective teamwork. But these gaps are not only related to business functions. And I see it more and more in identity related gaps: men versus women, millennials versus boomers, based on race, ethnicity, gender identity. I mean, it's really endless. My goal is to help people see the gaps that are causing big damage in their organizations. And so big damage means business loss, poor customer service, lawsuits, HR complaints. There's a lot of time and money wasted, or spent, I should say, investigating claims and complaints. And instead of that, I try to help people build a we culture. A we culture is one where you're not in agreement about everything. You don't have to like or even be friends, but you have understanding of them. Them can be, again, any of these other people who might have differences in relation to your own identity. So that's what WeBuilding is all about, to create a culture where everyone in the workplace feels safe, feels welcome, and can be productive.
Give us a couple of examples of what this can look like. So maybe start with the sales versus marketing example, and then maybe let's look at the boomer versus millennial example. Mm-hmm. So one is kind of like job function, and the other one is more around like, how old am I, and what was life like when I grew up?
So it's so interesting you asked about sales versus marketing. I was just speaking with a client recently, and they are, trying to do business during a pandemic. And so the marketing department in this organization devised a series of webinars for customers or potential customers. And it was to, kind of increase business, address the lack of business. Everybody is under more pressure because of the pandemic. And the sales department did not really enthusiastically support these webinars to the customers. And the marketing department got very angry. So sales and marketing were just at odds. And finally, it came out that the sales department thought that the webinars were boring, and they didn't want to put these, yet another boring webinar in front of a customer. They thought it would, not be a good idea for their customers. This is a perfect example of where these two departments that have the same goal, right? The goal is, let's be a successful organization. Let's meet our customer needs. Let's innovate new products. Let's increase our revenue and our market share. I mean, this is obvious. Yet, because of their inability to work together, they missed a great opportunity. So really what should have happened, and perhaps the leadership wasn't helping to foster this we culture, the marketing department did not seek the counsel of salespeople, which they should do. Salespeople have direct interaction with customers on a regular basis. And salespeople, if they thought this was being developed and didn't like what they heard or were worried about it being boring, should have quickly and communicated early on to their marketing department. And probably if they had worked together, they could have devised something that would have been useful. But as a result of their their us versus them dynamic, they wasted money, they wasted time. To me, this is a perfect example of the type of divisions that are inevitable and predictable. And I find that sometimes people in business think that you can't do anything about it. Oh, that's just the way it is. But you can do something about it. And I think it comes down to leadership. How are leaders fostering a we culture, or are the leaders themselves participating in the us versus them dynamic? For example, speaking about the marketing department in a dismissive way, or talking about a different geographical department. I think that happens a lot when you've got a headquarters and you've got, subsidiary offices or regional offices, and those people in Utah, they blah, 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 blah. Like that type of language happens all the time. And if leaders are not, first of all, noticing those types of comments and making sure that they're limited and actually promoting language like, why don't we work together with our team in Utah? Or perhaps the team in Utah needs support. What are some ideas? And those kinds of things.
So that example you gave of sales versus marketing, I was a bit surprised to find out just how common that particular us versus them scenario is out there, because that seems like one where it's almost like two sides of the same coin, right? The marketing team is there to try to drum up the awareness and drive the, top of funnel leads, if you will. And then the sales team is there to take those leads and close them into paying customers. And that seems so closely related and so interwoven that you wouldn't think that there would be such discord between those two functions in a business, but it's amazingly common.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, do you have a specific example, or what have you observed yourself?
One thing that I have observed is that it's surprisingly common for those two groups to answer to different executives. And that's always been a head scratcher for me, because the two functions are so closely related that it feels like they should both answer to the same executive and definitely see each other as part of the same team. And then the other thing that I've seen that doesn't make a lot of sense to me is that when marketing believes that they're not part of the close, or when, the sales team doesn't believe that they're part of the brand building and the awareness generation, that feels broken to me, because both sides should be contributing to the whole. And so I'm really interested to hear about this subject from you, kind of from a behavioral, philosophical, psychological type perspective, because I've only looked at it more from just like a marketing and sales perspective.
Part of the problem moving forward for many organizations is also the hybrid, work from home versus not work from home. This is a brand new dynamic that many companies aren't prepared to deal with. This is a critical issue. Many companies had to go to the work from home situation under duress, with no time to prepare. And now many organizations are going back, at least here in New York, where I am based. There's a lot of preparation. The next couple months, people will start to go back. So there's more time to give thought to these. I believe that we are in a rare opportunity to establish new norms of inclusion, new norms of working together. We building is teamwork plus inclusion work. And every leader should be thinking about how to incorporate these new norms of inclusion as people are returning. We're never going to have an opportunity like this again, I hope. It was a crisis with a lot of devastating results, but it offers us an opportunity as people are returning to work to set these new norms and to make a critical analysis of how have we behaved? Have our departments behaved in a very us versus them mentality? Has that been allowed? How do people sit? Where are the spaces they inhabit? I've noticed where some organizations have people on different floors. And of course, to a certain degree, that makes sense. But if you have departments, and I know companies that have this, they have departments where people don't even speak to each other. Someone in a recent webinar was just telling me about their organization. They have two departments where the humans in these departments do not speak to each other. So if you've got a situation like that, it's worth changing where people sit and inconveniencing a kind of logical flow of, sales on one floor and marketing on another. If you have these type of stakes, you have to do something to disrupt the us versus them dynamic. And not only disrupt that, you have to actively and deliberately facilitate a we culture.
I want to hear your advice for us here at Harmon Brothers. So the way that we're handling, the whole dynamic of in office versus at home, we've decided to take an approach where we let each individual make the decision for themselves based on their circumstances and their needs. So we have a spectrum from people who work 100% in the office because that's where they want to be and that's where they do their best work. And then we have on the other end of the spectrum people who are 100% remote and they never show up at the office. And then, there's a blend in between where people will kind of take a hybrid approach where they do a little of both. I would say that by and large, it's working. It hasn't been without challenges. It hasn't been smooth sailing the whole time. Like so many other companies, we kind of went into that, under duress. I would love to hear your advice on when you end up in an environment like that, where you do have the in offices versus the not in offices, and then some people who kind of bridge the gap. How do you create that we as opposed to the us versus them?
Such a good question that so many people are facing. It's not that much different from the many organizations I have worked with that have a headquarters location in, say, Tokyo and an office in New York, where there's clearly a common goal, but there are differences, even time differences. So people work from home, surely they are trying to work during office hours, but that might get a little flexible. In those cases, what's critical is that leaders are actively and deliberately building a we culture. If you just say, well, looks like this is working out, what's going to happen is that over time, divisions will become more entrenched. People that work from home most likely are going to experience what people in subsidiary offices feel: left out. It's just the nature of things. If there is a physical location where people are gathering and some people are not doing that, they will feel left out. Small little comments or events, somebody brings food in and they hear about it and they think, oh, I wasn't a part of that. Or big things. There's an urgent meeting or a casual meeting in the hallway where something important is decided. And then the people at home are just informed about it, or worse yet, find out about it by happenstance. So those us versus them dynamics at home and at work are going to become entrenched. One of your secret weapons, one of the we building secret weapons, are culturally fluid people. So culturally fluid people are people who understand more than one cultural group. So I would say at Harmon Brothers, you're going to have two cultures, the at home and the at work, and the blended people are really going to be a useful resource because they will know what it's like.
They can empathize.
They can empathize. They can experience, and they can say, hey, I'm noticing this, or last week I worked from home and this is what I noticed, or this is what I experienced. But that needs to be leveraged. It needs to be noticed by leadership and leveraged. And by leveraged, I mean that you pay attention and you ask people who are in this blended situation, during the next week, I'd love for you to just jot down some notes. Since you're going to be working from home, tell me what it's like. Tell me if there's something that you noticed from working from home. Are there ways that we can be more inclusive? Right? Just that question, that single question for any leader in any company in 2021 can be so useful. What are ways that we can be more inclusive? In this case, we're talking about inclusive hybrid, work from home versus working from the office. But that question can apply to any group. So one of the tools that I highly recommend is an online engagement vehicle called Mentimeter. Have you heard of Mentimeter?
Spell that.
Mentimeter. So if you Google Mentimeter, it's actually menti.com, menti.com. You can use it for fun, or you can use it for getting real input from people. And I have used it throughout the pandemic. When I conduct online webinars and events, I mostly do we building initiatives, which is exactly what I would suggest you think about for Harmon Brothers. And this is something you can do do on your own, just DIY. But it means, again, paying attention to this dynamic. I'll give you an example. Last week, I was working with a company, big global, actually one of the largest banks in all of the world. The people I'm working with are all newly hired people. They've started their job during the pandemic. They have never been to the physical office space here in New York. And so Mentimeter is a kind of online quiz, and we engage like 50 people, and there's a question that appears. You arrange the questions ahead of time. So one of the questions was, how do you feel about going back to the workplace? Yay, or, so I gave some answers, multiple choice answers, and people answer using their phones. So you can be in Tokyo and in Sao Paulo and New York, and everybody can participate at the same time. So 50 people answered that question anonymously. This is so valuable for leaders to get that kind of anonymous feedback. Then I said, is there anything the company can do to make your return to the office more successful? Yes, no, or I don't know. More than half of the people said yes. There's something the company can do. And then the final question, again, using Mentimeter, was, what can the company do? And then it's an open-ended question. And people, again, anonymously share their ideas. So some of the ideas were things like have somebody welcoming us when we show up those first days, have a map of the office. This is a huge office in New York City. Have people have a name map so we know who, if I need to get a name badge or, just basic things that ordinarily, if you'd been employed for a year, you would know this kind of stuff. These were great ideas generated by the people who are facing this situation. So Mentimeter is a wonderful tool. You can engage people for fun. So another example, some of my rebuilding initiatives, and this is what I would suggest for Harmon Brothers, you have to deliberately keep people connected over time. If you default to business as usual, the way we used to do things, you will miss opportunities to catch the warning signs. And if you pay attention to the warning signs, you can leverage that into actually building your relationship with people in a way that promotes cohesion, collaboration. Let me give you another example. In the fall, I'm going to do a We Building Buddy program with a global company, and they have people from all over the world. Normally, these people meet up once a year. They're representing different parts of this global network from different countries, but we can't do that. They're not going to do it this year. So instead, they're holding a very long kind of several week program, like one day a week. And throughout that program, we're going to pair people up as buddies throughout I think it's like a month long, maybe one event a week or something like that. They will have a We Building Buddy meeting online. Somebody in Australia might be meeting with someone in Korea, and they will answer a series of questions. We will deliver some basic questions, and the goal will be that over time, they will move from stranger to acquaintance, to colleague, to trusted colleague. Getting to the trusted colleague level relationship is the goal with as many people as possible. But what I've noticed is that when there is some difference, even in Harmon Brothers, I'm going to suggest, I don't know your organization, but I'm going to guess people have different backgrounds. You're not all the same. People easily move from stranger to acquaintance to colleague. But when there's some perceived difference, for example, the other topic you asked me to talk about, boomer versus millennial, when there's some difference or perceived difference, they don't work at it. They are overwhelmed. They're fearful of saying or doing the wrong thing. They're too busy. There are so many reasons, but they just stop at colleague level and they don't put in the work. And that's a missed opportunity. Having We Building initiatives where the company, Harmon Brothers, is deliberately acknowledging, we have this dynamic, and let's not wait for a crisis. Let's not wait for somebody to quit all of a sudden because they're so unhappy with the situation. Let's proactively build up a we culture. Let's actively narrow gaps and build trusted colleague relationships across whatever differences there are. In your case, hosting a We Building fun event once a quarter could be a great thing. I've hosted a couple events and I do them. I'm not talking about like, let's all have a casual cocktail hour. Those are nice. I think people do that. I'm talking about a super fun, produced 1 hour gathering for everybody where you have some prizes. And I don't mean expensive. I mean just fun. You use Mentimeter for fun. I did a quiz with the leaders with a recent company where we had the 3 leaders. And I talked to the leaders and I made a little quiz about these leaders. People had to guess, who am I talking about? One guy had been in London to hear Queen play in Live Aid. It was super fun. And there were, I think, 100 employees on this call where we just had fun. We asked some interesting questions, but it was a shared experience. And that's what WeBuilding is about. You either find commonalities that you already share. For example, sales and marketing share the same goal of wanting to meet customer needs, build revenue, build market share, et cetera. Or you create new shared experiences. For example, millennial versus boomer, who might not speak the same language, but you create a shared experience.
We have a tradition that's served us really well. So every Monday morning, we have an all-hands meeting. And at the end of the all-hands meeting, we either end it with what we call a spotlight or a wisdom. And in the case of a spotlight, it's where somebody gets the opportunity to tell about themselves, who they are, where they came from, what they're passionate about, that sort of thing. Or a wisdom is an opportunity where people get between 5 and 10 minutes to talk about any subject they want to, as long as they're passionate about it. And so we've had, things as wild as, fine Italian pizza making to Bigfoot hunting to like sound mixing, and the list goes on and on and on. But that has served us really, really well, because I think of what you're talking about, where people would otherwise kind of stop at colleague, but as soon as you allow somebody a stage on which they can go deeper, then that opens up the door for their colleagues to kind of come inside and become more than colleagues.
I think it's great. And I would say, I believe that face-to-face interactions of increasing depth are the path toward unity in any organization. And that includes virtual face-to-face.
So let me ask a couple of questions about that, because I agree. For me, face-to-face interaction is absolutely essential to relationship building, to just, maybe it's the way that I lead, the way that I manage, but I thrive on face-to-face. And so as my meaningful portion of my workforce has gone remote, I have continued to ask them to, turn on your camera, because even though you're remote, I still want to look into your eyes and I still want to see you face-to-face. But this is the question that I have for you. I've never taken that to the point of, kind of like getting very forceful with it, or really pushing to have the camera on. I've more kind of left it as like, hey, I encourage you to turn on the camera. I understand sometimes situations don't allow, but whenever possible, turn it on. And I've found that for a pretty meaningful number of people, that hasn't been enough to actually get them to turn on their cameras. They prefer to, just always stay camera off and just interact via voice. And while on one hand, I want to respect that decision, on the other hand, I'm genuinely worried about the lack of that face-to-face, eye-to-eye interaction. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that very thing, and how much emphasis I should be putting on it.
If people are only using their voice, you're limiting your ability to communicate effectively. So why would you do that? Why would that be something you want to allow to happen? I recognize that working from home, sometimes it's not comfortable, or you've got somebody else in the room and you shouldn't have your camera on. I would accept a certain amount of that. But this is an opportunity where I was talking about new norms of inclusion. We are in a pandemic still, but we as an organization, this way, not because of the pandemic, but because this is the new way we Harmon Brothers want to work, right? You never would have entertained this had it not been for the pandemic, correct? So we recognize that there are some positives to this, but any communication expert can tell you, when we communicate as humans in business, we're not just using our voices and we're not just listening. We're using our eyes. We're using sense of our kinetic ability to understand others in proximity. By allowing people to have their cameras off as a default for long-term behavior, you've really limited the functionality of communication, which is something I know you don't want to do, right? If anything, we want to increase everybody's ability to communicate and be effective with one another. So if I were in your situation, I would find a good hook, a new reason, starting September 1st or whatever, as part of our WeBuilding initiative. here's a new policy we'd like everybody to follow for this reason. The default will be cameras on from 9 to 5, or, and every Monday meeting, cameras on no matter what. Exceptions, of course, if you have a situation, let us know, or, just setting some norms, new norms, where the default becomes both visual and vocal communication.
Yep. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
But I understand why you have the situation you did. Again, you went into this in a crisis. You're trying to accommodate people. Of course, I love not having my camera on. I can be in my pajamas.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to work in your underwear, but sometimes it just isn't sufficient. What have you faced on your journey?
I think that I'm still in the poop phase in terms of my journey towards sharing my message and being successful in that way. I've been very clear about developing my message, developing the ideas. I have helped many people build trust, but really it started with my own failure. When I was 22, a couple weeks after graduating from college, I was in the Tokyo headquarters of Honda Motor Company, and I caused a big problem. I caused a lot of crap, if you will, because I failed to pay attention to the us versus them dynamics. And I really irritated a very senior office lady without knowing it, because I wasn't paying attention to these dynamics. And so the kind of dynamics you and I have been discussing are different. They're not related to nationality cultures, but these us versus them culture dynamics exist everywhere in every organization. So it's incumbent upon leaders who want to be successful to pay attention to them. And so in my case, I wasn't respectful of her authority as a senior. I treated her nicely and with respect, but there's a very rigid hierarchy in Japan. I did judo in college, and there's two types of students. There are black belts and white belts. And so when I went into this office lady situation, I was very clearly a white belt, and she was very clearly a black belt, but I didn't acknowledge that. It just never occurred to me. Through that painful experience, I started to understand that the us versus them dynamics are sometimes visible, such as with people from different countries, speaking different cultures or different regional offices. But other times, these culture differences are less visible. And because of that, they require even more attention.
It's so fun to get to speak with an expert like yourself on this subject, because as a leader of an organization, so much time and thought and effort and care goes into making sure that everyone is rowing in the same direction and everyone is working towards the same goals. And so anytime that, I see within my organization this us versus them, it not only breaks my heart, but it worries me about, whether or not we're going to be successful as an organization. So I'm personally very excited to get to read your books and to get to study you more thoroughly and apply some of these principles here at Harmon Brothers. But for our listeners who are also interested, where can they learn more and where can they keep in touch with you?
My website is my name, which is Laura Kriska with a K, Kriska. LinkedIn is a really good place to connect with me. I offer webinars. Sometimes last week, I offered a free webinar on how to learn to speak perfect Japanese in 10 minutes. And it's on LinkedIn. You can go see it now. If you get the Olympic spirit and you want to learn to speak Japanese, you can check that out. But LinkedIn or my website are the best places. And if you don't mind, I would like to say that it is my life's work to inspire a rebuilding revolution where people take action to bridge us versus them gaps in the workplace and beyond to create a safer, more welcoming and productive world. So I can't do this by myself. So I need your help and your listeners' help so that we can get to that place together.
For our listeners, as always, if you like what you heard and you want to learn more, check us out at harmonbrothers.com. Make sure to follow the podcast, like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And we will see you on the next episode.
Want to learn the tricks of our trade? We have them all laid out in our courses on Harmon Brothers University. This isn't surface level stuff here. This is our entire playbook, all our secrets laid out in full. The same training we give our own employees. You'll find courses on ad buying, writing video scripts to sell your product or service, creating the kind of large production ads we're known for, even making short ads using nothing but your cell phone. If you're looking to use video marketing to take your business to the next level, Harmon Brothers University has the course for you.
Our students have seen incredible growth in their businesses by implementing what they learned in our courses. Take these reviews as living proof.
We've now got multiple campaigns that are in the millions of views and in the multiple millions of dollars in sales. Within a week, we're close to 10 million views, over $1 million in sales, and most impressively, we've covered 100% of the production costs in the first 24 hours of releasing it.
We saw immediate results. Sales went up 10x the first day.
The first video we did is over 30 million views, the most customers that we've ever acquired in a single month. I think we hit about 26,000 new customers.
Go to HarmonBrothersUniversity.com to start accelerating your business's growth with video.